Chapter 6: The Transfer of Power. Jonathan Harker had only just begun to recover from the unnerving events of his time in the Carpathian Mountains when he found himself thrust into a new and inexplicable ordeal. As the early September sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden hue over the land, Harker was still grappling with the reality of his experiences at Count Dracula's castle. The mysterious, almost supernatural presence of the Count lingered in his thoughts, overshadowing every waking moment. His brief respite was shattered when a strange and foreboding message arrived. It was a terse note from the Count, instructing him to visit a nearby town to finalize some important transactions. The brevity and commanding tone left Harker uneasy. There was an air of urgency that he could not ignore. He was to meet with a solicitor named Mr. Hawkins, a connection that was apparently crucial to the Count's plans. Harker's journey took him to a quaint yet strangely unfamiliar town, nestled in the rolling hills. It was an idyllic setting, with cobbled streets and charming cottages, but the air seemed heavy with an unspoken tension. He was greeted by Mr. Hawkins, a plump, genial man whose appearance belied the seriousness of the matter at hand. "Ah, Mr. Harker, so good of you to come," Hawkins said, shaking his hand warmly. "I trust your journey was pleasant?" "As pleasant as can be," Harker replied, though his unease was palpable. "What's the matter that couldn't wait?" Mr. Hawkins led him to a small, dimly lit office lined with dusty bookshelves. "I'm afraid we have some pressing legal matters to discuss. It pertains to the Count's recent investments." They sat down, and Hawkins began to explain in meticulous detail the various properties that Count Dracula had acquired across England. Harker listened intently, but his mind was partially preoccupied with his recent experiences. The Count's strange behavior, his uncanny ability to influence the world around him, and the shadowy figures that seemed to lurk just beyond sight plagued his thoughts. As Hawkins spoke, he occasionally glanced at Harker with an almost imperceptible look of concern. It seemed as though Hawkins was struggling with the gravity of the situation, but he kept his composure. "Now," Hawkins said, "we need to finalize the transfer of several properties into the Count's name. This includes a substantial estate in Whitby, a coastal town." Harker's ears perked up at the mention of Whitby. "Whitby? I've heard of it. It's quite a picturesque place." "Yes, indeed," Hawkins replied, "but it's also of particular interest to the Count for reasons that are beyond my comprehension. All I can tell you is that these transactions are crucial for his plans." The conversation shifted to the legal formalities. Harker signed the necessary documents, feeling a growing sense of dread. There was something about the Count's involvement that seemed to reach into every corner of England, and Harker couldn't shake the feeling that he was being drawn into something much larger than he could comprehend. After completing the paperwork, Harker found himself free to wander the town. He decided to take a leisurely walk to clear his head. As he strolled through the narrow streets, he couldn't help but notice that the townspeople seemed unusually reserved, their glances fleeting and their conversations hushed. He stopped by a local inn for a drink, hoping to blend in and perhaps overhear something that might shed light on the peculiar atmosphere of the town. As he sat nursing a glass of ale, he overheard snippets of conversation that sent a shiver down his spine. "It's not just the Count," one local said to another. "There's something more sinister afoot." Harker strained to listen, but the conversation soon shifted to safer topics. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was a conspiracy of silence surrounding the Count's activities. His thoughts were interrupted by a sudden commotion outside. Rushing to the window, Harker saw a group of villagers gathered around a peculiar sight, a large, dark carriage, drawn by horses whose eyes seemed to glint with an unnatural intelligence. The carriage was unfamiliar, and its presence in the town seemed to heighten the air of apprehension. The carriage moved slowly down the main street, and as it passed, Harker noticed that the horses were driven by a figure cloaked in black, their face hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat. The figure exuded an aura of malevolence, and Harker's unease deepened. Harker decided to investigate further. Following the carriage from a safe distance, he observed it making its way towards the outskirts of town, where the land grew wilder and less populated. The carriage finally came to a halt near an old, abandoned mansion that seemed to have been long forgotten. As the figure disembarked, the door of the mansion creaked open, revealing a dark interior that seemed to swallow up the little light that remained. Harker, driven by a mix of curiosity and dread, decided to approach the mansion under the cover of darkness. He crept through the overgrown foliage and slipped inside through a cracked window. The interior of the mansion was a shadowy labyrinth of decaying furniture and cobwebs. Harker's footsteps echoed eerily as he made his way through the gloom, guided by the dim light of his lantern. He eventually reached a large, central room, where he saw the cloaked figure engaged in what appeared to be a ritualistic ceremony. On a large, ornate table, various items were laid out: ancient books, strange symbols, and an assortment of arcane objects. The figure moved with deliberate, almost reverent precision, their actions imbued with an air of dark purpose. As Harker watched in stunned silence, the figure began to chant in a language that was both alien and haunting. The air grew colder, and an inexplicable sense of dread permeated the room. Harker's heart raced as he realized that this was no ordinary gathering, it was a gathering of forces beyond his understanding. Unable to bear the oppressive atmosphere any longer, Harker retreated quietly, making his way back to the town with a pounding heart. He knew that he had stumbled upon something significant, something that connected directly to the Count and his enigmatic plans. The next morning, Harker returned to Mr. Hawkins' office, eager to share his findings. However, Hawkins was noticeably absent, and the staff at the office seemed unusually tight-lipped. Harker's attempts to locate Hawkins proved fruitless, and he was left with an overwhelming sense of frustration and foreboding. With no other leads, Harker decided to return to Whitby, where he hoped to find more answers. The coastal town beckoned with its promise of clarity, and Harker felt an inexplicable pull towards it. As he prepared for his journey, he couldn't shake the feeling that his own fate was inextricably linked to the dark forces that seemed to be converging upon England. The shadows of Dracula's influence loomed ever larger, and Jonathan Harker was caught in a web of mystery and danger, his path intertwined with the Count's insidious plans. The transfer of power was more than a mere legal formality, it was a harbinger of a much darker reality that was about to unfold.